What's up everyone, Swillow here. Today I have a very special and personal story. I'm going to talk about my journey involving competitive gaming. I'm going to talk about what first inspired me to get into competitive gaming, my growth and accomplishments in competitive gaming, and my current mindset on competitive gaming. This is going to be a long one, so grab your snacks and kick back, everyone. So as a kid, I always had a competitive side to me. Well, I think it's pretty natural for most people too. I mean, nobody likes to lose, right? I guess the difference is that if you take losing more as a challenge to overcome rather than just being disappointed in losing and not actually doing anything about it. For me, I definitely like to prove that I'm good at whatever I try, and maybe it's not necessarily that I want to be directly better than someone, but I just want to be good at the things I do in general, you know? It's like a self-growth thing. Of course, maybe if you directly challenge me, I will definitely step up, so feel free to. I was first exposed to competitive gaming through a YouTube video called Shine Blind. This was a Star Fox combo video, Fox McCloud, whatever you want to call him, for Super Smash Bros. Melee. And wow, when I watched this video, it was like my mind had been unlocked and exposed to this whole new world of potential when it comes to playing video games. Just seeing that there was people who pushed gaming to such a level, it was so cool. It was art. As an artist myself, well, I guess at the time when I first saw this video, I wasn't exactly an artist, but I've always enjoyed art, and I love seeing the artistic side that everything can have. So to me, competitive gaming and playing games is like an art. It's a powerful form of self-expression. I instantly decided from then on that I wanted to be able to play games in a way that looked cool and skillful. I wanted someone to be able to look at my gameplay and be inspired and excited the way I was when I first saw this video. And it changed my life, honestly. It's kind of crazy to think just a video of a video game, but it was more of, I guess, the potential within the video. Just the potential of being able to do things at such a level. I hadn't really been exposed to that at this point in my life. So it was such an amazing video for me that just kind of changed my outlook on everything. I started studying competitive Smash Bros, and I learned all the cool advanced techniques like wave dashing, L canceling, edge hogging, and stuff. It felt so satisfying, though all my friends started to hate playing with me because I pretty much became unbeatable with these techniques. I tried to teach them, but you know how it is, not everybody's gonna be inspired or motivated to practice stuff like this. So I just continued to practice on my own and become the best I could. I didn't really have anybody else that was trying to learn this stuff alongside me, so I could never really practice or gauge what level I was at to tell if I was actually good or not. I eventually ended up taking a family vacation to Florida, and I got the chance to enter a tournament for Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I got completely destroyed. No lie, I got demolished. It was actually mind-boggling to me. Even though I knew all these techniques, just knowing these techniques wasn't enough to be skilled as a competitive gamer. There was something missing, something that took me a long time to figure out. Honestly, I still don't even know if I can say that I truly have it figured out, but it's more the mental and knowledge side of competitive gaming. Understanding your opponent, understanding technicals like frame data and stuff. Just really having the right mental fortitude and mentality to compete. Of course, I went many years without really even having a clue what this meant, or that this was even a real factor in competitive gaming. After I lost this tournament, I sort of toned down my excitement to become a competitive gamer. I didn't give up, but I was definitely humbled, and I realized this was going to be a lot harder than I could have possibly imagined at the time. I continued to play a lot of different games, single player, multiplayer, whatever. In each game I played, I kept focusing on being as knowledgeable and skillful as I possibly could. It's like a consistency thing, right? Always try to approach everything with a consistent and strong mentality. So I kept pushing my limits, and I would sit and practice for literal hours, just the same technique over and over. It's kind of crazy to think back to because I would just sit for like 5 hours straight, just trying to master some technique I saw or some idea I had in my head. The great thing though is that the more I practiced each game, I was able to keep getting better and better overall. So each new game I played, I was able to learn it faster. I was able to apply my knowledge that I had gained from all the previous games I played across every game. So it was just a big build-up. I just kept getting better and better at everything in general. And this is kind of sidetracked from competitive gaming a little bit, but I feel this mindset and play philosophy carried into my competitive endeavors. So next up, in terms of games that you could say were more competitive that I played, next up was BlazBlue. It was a new fighting game from one of my favorite game developers, and I was excited to play this game because it was new. Most other games I had tried had been out for a while, so everyone was really good at them, and it's kind of hard to come into a game later in its life cycle. But BlazBlue was new, so I could play the game on an even level as everyone else for the most part. I mean, Guilty Gear players, of course, had an easier time coming in since there was a lot of similar elements, but it wasn't too bad. I was able to hold my own and feel strong in the game, something I haven't really felt in any game up to this point. Maybe not great, but it wasn't like Super Smash Bros. Melee where it felt hopeless. I could at least see a glimmer of hope when I lost to a strong player in BlazBlue, like it wasn't something I couldn't overcome if I practiced. Now, I never actually entered any tournaments for BlazBlue until like the third installment, I think. It was at an anime convention, and it was my first anime convention actually, so I was surprised to see that they held tournaments there, and they had one for BlazBlue. I believe at the time it was Continuum Shift that was out. I played Mikoto and I won. It was pretty amazing. Of course, an anime convention tournament doesn't really compare to even like a regular local tournament, let alone like a major or something. But it was still a good feeling and motivational that all my playing had got me good enough to be able to hold my own. I'd gotten better at competitive gaming, but I was still so far from being at like a strong level, or a level that I felt good and confident in. Of course, I still didn't even really know this at the time. I still just haven't had enough exposure to really understand. It's kind of scary to think that you can just be playing and practicing and having the idea of competing, and you may even be able to win small tournaments, local tournaments, and beat strong players, but you still might be missing the crucial understanding to compete at the highest levels. I feel like it may not be uncommon for a lot of people to compete, but never actually reach the point where they truly understand what it means to compete, if that makes sense. There's a sort of hidden next level that you have to break in your mind to be prepared to accomplish anything, or at least understand exactly what you were doing right or wrong in your play. I continue to play BlazBlue, and I also played a variety of other games, but I think the next big game that really stood out to me was Persona 4 Arena. When that released, I had competed locally again, and I was able to get like consistent top 4 placings in my local region, so it was pretty cool. It felt nice to be able to be towards a top spot in my area, so I definitely felt that I was getting better, but I definitely knew I still had a long way to go, still a lot to learn. Throughout the years, I continued to try essentially every fighting game I could get my hands on. Imports, 2D, 3D, fan service games, whatever. I just loved fighting games and competing against other people. So I can continue to expose myself to fighting games or any type of game where I could just compete against other people. The next game that became like the major step in my competitive life though was Pokken Tournament, a Pokemon fighting game. Now, I was going to play this game no matter what, but what pushed me to take this game truly serious was when they announced a big championship series for the game prior to its release. For me, this was my chance. A fresh new game that nobody had experience with yet, and they had a big money series to compete in. This is pretty much the competitive dream, right? Of course, traveling and funding all of this was not going to be easy, but I had actually known someone. It was actually kind of crazy that just like probably a week before they announced this series, I had was kind of just casually talking to someone about a competitive gaming team, and right as soon as I saw them announce this series, I ran and hit them up instantly, and I was able to convince him that I was skilled enough to pull this off. So this was before the game even came out, before I even had a chance to play the game. So me, along with my brother, we got sponsored, and we was able to travel to these major events. Of course, before these major events, we had to actually play the game. And once the game came out, I had practiced the game non-stop with my brother, and there was one other in the team as well. And we all went to our first local tournament, and it was really hype. I was super hyped. I thought I was going to do so good after all this practice. I walked in and I started watching other players, and I was like, wow, these people actually look really good. They were doing some neat things, and I was starting to wonder if I was ready for this. So I was kind of getting cold feet, even though I had practiced so much. I played my first match and I lost, and I was devastated actually. All this practice, and I even got a sponsor, and I just lost my first game. At the moment, I kind of hit two paths in my mind. I was like, I could just accept whatever happens, accept defeat pretty much, or not settle for this. Because deep down I definitely believed that I was capable of being one of the best. I knew I had the skills, the understanding, and the practice. But I was already in the loser bracket of the tournament. And I stepped up to play my next game with pretty much what felt like a newfound resolve. I was going to play with the highest level of confidence, like a survival of the fittest. 2 people walk in and only 1 walk out. With this approach, I knew I was going to be skilled enough to beat anyone. So I won my second match pretty cleanly, and I continued to beat every opponent I went up against until I made it all the way to Grand Finals, after losing my very first game. My brother had also made it to Grand Finals, so at that point, it was a sigh of relief. We both did exactly what we needed to do, get the top 2 spots of the tournament. We both continued to dominate our local tournaments, getting top spots, and after a while, another player was able to come in and start beating us. Though we were still able to place very highly, this player went by the tag of Suicune Master, and he ended up becoming my first real rival in competitive gaming. For the longest time, I simply could not beat him, but I was understanding more and more every time we played. After playing several local tournaments, the first major tournament came up. At the time, I lived in South Florida. This tournament was in Texas. Me, my brother, and Suicune Master all traveled to this major event, and it was our region's chance to prove our dominance. Now for me, I had practiced a lot, but I also had a full-time job and lots of other personal matters. So while I was still confident, I felt like I didn't have quite as much practice as some others going into this event. I played through my matches, and I was winning the majority of them easily. Eventually I got to a match against a player, a Gengar player, and he was destroying me. It literally got down to last hit, last game, and I was about to lose like this. It was almost like the very first game I had played at my first local tournament. Was I just going to lose like this? That's all I was thinking, like, this is happening again? I'm just getting completely destroyed, like I hadn't even played the game before. I just stopped and held my block button for a bit. Like, I took a deep breath. I was 1 hit away from losing. And I just used the most YOLO move that I had. And I played Mewtwo. It was in field phase. Some of you probably already know exactly what move this is. It's like a meme tier, YOLO. But I used Hyper Beam and it hit. And once I hit with that, I just went on a rampage and flipped the match around completely and won it. I had made it to top 8 at my first major. It was a great feeling. Once I got the top 8, I felt a bit more relaxed. I feel like this is a problem for me. I have a tendency to get relaxed when I reach a certain point in a tournament. And I'm not going to say that like it's an excuse for my losses, but it definitely is more appealing to lose later in the tournament than earlier, right? I went on to come in 5th place, and sure I would have liked to do better, but I felt like this was good enough for now. I went to continue doing well at local tournaments, and I had traveled to a variety of major events as well. I was doing fairly well at all these events, but I guess I wanted to be doing better. After getting a number of local top placements and several top 8 placements at major tournaments, the next big event came, which was Evolution 2016, or EVO for short, which is known as the biggest fighting game tournament in the world. And for the game I was playing, this ended up being the single biggest tournament in the game's lifetime, over 1,000 players in it. I had practiced as much as I could, and I was ready to prove myself on the biggest stage. Though I had registered late, so I didn't get seeded, which kinda sucks, right? For anyone who doesn't know how seeding works, it's pretty much when you're placed in a specific part of a tournament bracket based on how well you have done at other tournaments. So seeding is made so that you won't have situations where you have to fight other strong players early in a tournament if you're a strong player yourself, so you don't get like two of the best players in the world fighting each other round one or something. Since these players are so strong, they should have the opportunity to meet later in the tournament rather than potentially knock each other out of the tournament at the very beginning. So since I didn't get seeded, I ended up having to fight a lot of pretty strong players throughout my bracket. The first strong player I fought was Alistair. He was in my pools, and Alistair was a pretty big name in Pokken at the time, even still is now. He's like a major community figure and also had frequent top 8 placements. I played him in pools and I beat him. Honestly, I beat him pretty convincingly as well. And for me, I was just sort of unfazed at who I had to play. I just kept sweeping through my matches one by one, and I also went on to fight another strong name player that I wasn't really aware of. Like, I haven't got to play him or see him play a lot, but his name was Sheer. He had won one of the major qualifying events for the championship series, but I beat him pretty easily. During our match, I even kind of looked over at him and he was shaking. I didn't know if he had tournament nerves in general. Maybe he just didn't compete a lot. I mean, even if you have competed, even if you have won events, tournament nerves are very real. So, you know, I don't know if he just had general tournament nerves or if he was even maybe just nervous at fighting me. Even though I hadn't won any major events, I was still kind of a known name in the community. So, even though he had won a major event, that might not be enough to feel comfortable at all times. Who knows? But I guess it was just interesting to see your opponent just so visually nervous. Especially since I felt like maybe I was the one who should have been a little more worried going into that match. I continued to breeze through my opponents. I fought some strong Japanese players and a variety of other strong players. It was pretty crazy. I made it to top 8 of the biggest tournament, but I didn't get comfortable just yet like I usually do. I ended up losing to a strong Japanese player. It was pretty close, and I was now in loser's bracket. When I got to top 8, I was in the winner's side. So my first loss in top 8 put me in the loser's bracket, and I ended up having to fight my fellow region player, Suicune Master, my rival, my personal bracket demon, who to that day I had not been able to beat him at a major. So this was a really intense situation to be in. The game started and it seemed like he was just going to beat me again, but things got closer throughout the set and eventually it started to become very winnable for me, and I pulled it off. Right when it mattered the most on the grand stage, I was finally able to beat my rival. After that, I had to fight a really strong Japanese player known as Poteden. Honestly, didn't know much about him as a player. There wasn't like a lot of footage of him for me to study. Like, a lot of the Japanese players I did get to study leading into the tournament, but there's some Japanese players who just didn't really have a lot of footage. So I wasn't really sure about him as a player other than everybody just saying that he's really strong. So I had to go with the flow. At the start of the match, he was destroying me, but I quickly understood him as a player, and the reason why was because the way he played was actually super similar to me. He was like my Japanese counterpart. He played with a lot of confidence and some disrespect in his play. And so once I saw how he was trying to constantly check my skills as a player, that's when I pretty much said, nah, I'm gonna run this show, not you, my friend. I went on to flip the momentum, and after a couple of intense games, I had won. At this point, I was guaranteed 3rd place. I was the highest placing American player left in the tournament, I had beaten my rival, I had beaten many other strong players who had placed and won major tournaments. It was crazy to think that I had come this far. I had proven that I can be one of the best when I put the effort forward. I went on to lose my next match against Tonosama, who was known as the best player at the time, and honestly he beat me pretty easily. I definitely was not on his level. I did not have the knowledge I needed to compete against him at the time. But I came in third, and even though you always want more, at an event this grand, it actually, like, I actually felt really proud for once. Like, I actually felt like, okay, I'm kind of at the top. Like, I guess you could always say that I was high up there at the top, and maybe some people saw me as a top player, but it was at this time that I actually felt personally like myself that I was a top player, and it was really cool. And this was definitely like the pinnacle of my competitive career. I would say after this, things started to go down a bit, mostly due to just kind of losing a bit of interest. But I kept practicing, and because I did want to be a competitive gamer, and there was even people who had questioned how good I actually was despite my performance. So I had to sort of remind them from time to time that I'm still very capable. I had taken a long hiatus, but it felt like I was losing traction as a top player, so I had to go out and prove myself somehow. I had went to final round, and I had been out of the game for a good while at this point, so I wasn't sure what to expect. But I managed to do my thing. I took down many strong players, and I even managed to beat my rival again in this tournament, and I beat him very cleanly this time as well. I went on to come into third at this tournament, and this was honestly a really stacked tournament. A lot of people said up to this point this was probably the most stacked tournament in the game's history, at least in terms of like North American players. So I did pretty well there after being on a pretty big break, and that was kind of when I really like solidified in my mind that I'm a good player regardless of what other people feel. Now, I understand in fighting games or competitive games, as time goes on and the meta evolves, not all players can keep up. But the thing for me is that I felt like I had reached a point mentally where if I want to come back, I know what I have to do to be able to compete in the current meta. So I feel like if I take a break and people start saying, well, he hasn't attended things recently, that he's not so good, he's not as good anymore. I mean, yeah, I might not be as good if compared to if I was actively practicing, but at the same time, I still had become capable enough that I could compete in the current meta if I did the proper research and practice. So at that point, that was pretty much like my last, I think I entered one more major after that, which I did so-so. I got top 8, but it was like an underwhelming top 8 for me at least. And after that, I pretty much have not traveled to a major since. I have competed locally in some random stuff like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, Dragon Ball Fighters, and stuff like that, and I did decent. I've had some pretty solid local results, but overall, I kind of just dialed it down a bit. It was a long road of being exposed to competitive gaming and accomplishing something fairly big, and while I would have liked to do even better, I still did good enough, and I feel like that's all I ever really wanted to prove, was that I can be one of the very best in the world at something if I put effort forth. So as it stands now, I'm pretty much retired. I don't want to say retired from competitive gaming, but I definitely don't have the drive to practice and put myself in a big major event and say to myself, convince myself that I'm actually going to do well, because that's not going to happen. I know I can beat a lot of good players, and I know I'm still a strong player, but that's sort of like a road that's passed for me. That's a chapter of my life that has passed, you know. I proved myself enough to know that if I wanted to keep going, I could keep going, but you know, I don't really have the passion to keep going. So it doesn't make sense to do something that if you don't have that real passion there. So if you managed to stay to the end of this story, well, I'm very thankful and I hope you enjoyed it. Just remember that if you work hard, work smart, and believe in yourself, you can accomplish the things you want to accomplish in life, even if at first they seem completely hopeless. You know, like I said, I entered my first Melee tournament and I got demolished. And at that point, that was pretty much rock bottom. I was rock bottom, you know, like you couldn't even like touch your opponents. So I went from rock bottom as a competitive player to getting a EVO top 8 medal. That's definitely like, that's a story if you can ever say there is a story. So never give up. Like if it's something you want to do, if you don't have the proper passion for it, then that's one thing. But if you do want to do it, you can definitely do it. And this isn't even just about competitive gaming, but anything you do in life. If you have the proper passion, but at first it seems really bleak and hopeless, definitely don't give up. Just as long as you have the passion and you're working smart and working hard, that's what matters. Believe in yourself. Put in the proper work and it goes a long way. Anyways, just let me know what you think of my story. You can even share some other little personal stories with me as well in the comments. And maybe I'll make some other personal stories like this if you enjoyed this. Just check my description for all my links. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Peace.